Hey guys, it's Tuesday, and you know what that means. I'm Alex.
And I'm Amber, and this is True Crime and Chill.
So, Amber, today's case is one that I've always find myself kind of going back to no matter what. Mainly just because, with like all my favorite cases, there's always so much going on, and if I keep going back and looking at it, I might actually find something to kind of make this case make sense. An example of that is when I was researching this case a little bit more for this episode, I actually found something that made me go, okay. This case is also a huge example of why it's so important to always go out with close friends and stay with them to be safe. This is the mysterious disappearance of Lauren Spierer.
Let's get to it.
Okay, so now Lauren was actually born on January 17th, 1991, to Robert and Charlene Spierer. Growing up in Scarsdale, New York, Lauren is actually remembered as being a very bubbly, very kind person that was always trying to help others. She did really well in school and actually eventually graduated from Edgemont High School in 2009. She had been accepted to Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. Her parents actually said she was super excited for her to go. While she was in high school, she actually attended summer camp each summer where she met her boyfriend Jesse Wolfe and another friend, Jay Rosenbaum. She ended up making a close circle of friends at this summer camp that actually they all ended up going to the same college together.
Oh, well, that sounds perfect.
Right? Like, I never actually went to college, but I feel like having a group of friends that you know before going probably helps out with a lot of the anxiety and like the nervousness of being in a new place with, without any family members or anything.
I mean, it depends.
Right? You don't really want people like that knew you, but like, well, I mean, like, but just like having somebody from home so that way you could be like, oh, hey, like, like that familiarity, I guess would be the word for it.
When you're that far away, yeah.
Yeah. So the night Lauren disappeared, it was June 3rd, 2011. The semester was ending for Lauren and her friends, and honestly, it had been a particularly rough one. Lauren ended up leaving her apartments, the Smallwoods, with her friend David Rohn, and they were actually both heading over to Jay's apartment, her friend from camp, who was having a get together. There's actual CCTV footage of her leaving her apartment in the outfit that she was actually wearing the night that she disappeared as well. She seemed sober, alert, and honestly pretty normal.
And Jay is the friend you mentioned before, the one that she had known for years?
Yeah, so he had a friend in town, so he figured, he would have a party, there's a friend in town, like, they're college kids, any excuse to basically party and drink and have fun and hang out and stuff, so, now, Jay actually lived probably, I think it was like a 10-minute walk from Lauren's apartment to Jay's apartment complex and stuff, so it was all very close together. Now, Lauren didn't actually leave her apartment until about 12:30. So what they were doing is they were going to go to Jay's and pregame and then go to a bar and stuff. Now, I don't know about you, but by 12:30, I was usually about 4 or 5 drinks in at this point when I would go out with my friends.
Only 4 or 5? Because we would usually go out about 10 and probably have 3 or 4 before we even went out at 10. Granted, the apartment that I lived in was like on the same street as the bar.
Yeah.
So we could literally crawl home if we wanted to, which I think I did once.
I did all my partying when I was in Hawaii and stuff, when I was in the military, And so at the time I lived on Schofield Barracks, and the bar that me and my friends used to always go to was a bar called Whiskey Dick's. And it was probably about 20, 30 minutes away from Schofield and such. So we would end up like heading out about, oh goodness, we would end up heading out probably about 9. We would meet at the bar because we would usually grab something to eat at the restaurant downstairs. And then I would be dancing so much. So I actually, on nights when I danced, I never really drank too much. But by 12:30, I was like, okay, we have like another hour and a half before we have to go home. And then I'm going home and going to bed. Now, me staying up till 12:30, the only time I ever do that is when I'm binge watching Netflix. And then I feel like death the next day. Like, I couldn't imagine doing that.
I don't know how I did that. No, back in the day. But granted, there was about a month where we were partying at this house. and we would have like legit parties, and everybody would show up sober because A, there were a lot of bedrooms that everybody could just crash at, and then B, we would play
Mhm.
drinking games. So if you showed up
Mhm.
already drinking and then did these party games, you easily could have given yourself alcohol poisoning.
Yeah.
So
I know, and then you look back on it now and you're like, I don't know how we survived that.
uh, nope,
So
nope, not
David
anymore.
and Lauren get to so David and Lauren get to Jay's apartment with no problem. She had actually messaged Jesse Wolf, her boyfriend, when they got to the apartment to check in.
So was he meeting her later?
No. Jesse had actually decided to stay in that night and just kind of have a quiet night with some of his brothers because Jesse was in a fraternity. So back when police went and interviewed him, Jesse basically told him, like, we were just sitting around, we were watching TV, we were watching a sports game, I think it was, and drinking and just kind of just chilling out for that night. He knew that Laura knew the people that she was with, aka, Jay and stuff like that. So he figured that she would be in good hands. So they get to Jay's apartment. Lauren and David actually meet up with a friend, like a mutual friend of Jay's, Corey Rossman. Now, Corey had met Lauren probably a few weeks prior, and so she knew him. They weren't friends, but they were more of acquaintances. They're drinking buddies, basically. That's what they were. Now, what I'm going to do in the next part is I'm basically just going to give you guys the rundown of everything before we start going into specific details, just so you can kind of have like the timeline of the night in your head while I separate that. So about 1:30, 1:35, Lauren and Corey actually end up leaving the apartment complex to go bar hopping and stuff. Nobody really thought anything of it. I mean, now I wouldn't actually leave an apartment with somebody that I didn't really know all that well. But when you're in college and you're young and stuff, you're trusting and everything. And you meet somebody a few times, they're like, oh, they're so nice and stuff. And you end up leaving with them. So Lauren and Corey end up going to a bar called Kilroy's, which is actually, I'll have a picture on our website, truecrimeandchill.com. It shows Kilroy's bar. It's a different name now and stuff, but back then it was Kilroy's. In the background, you see Lauren's apartment actually. So you see her
Oh,
apartment complex. So that's how close the bar was to her house. So about
right.
1:46 a.m. On security footage, Lauren is actually seen entering Kilroy's with Corey. A lot of different reports say that it was just Lauren and Corey. Some reports say that it was Lauren, Corey, and a few other people who didn't really need to be mentioned because they weren't involved. But at the same time, nothing I found has ever had like concrete evidence, if that makes sense. A lot of the articles that I read have conflicting evidence. So it's kind of like this article has like this piece, and this article has like this piece, and this article has this piece, but none of the stories are kind of add up and stuff. So going based on surveillance videos and some witness statements, police were able to deduce that Lauren had left Kilroy's around 2:27 in the morning with Corey, meaning she was really only at the bar for about 45 minutes. Not that long at all. When she left her shoes and phone at the bar, and they end up walking back to her apartment.
Wow, she must have been pretty toasty if she left her shoes. Like I mean, I've left my ID, I've left my phone. I don't know that I've ever left my shoes though.
Pretty toasty. But yeah, so there was a back patio at Kilroy's that people could go out to smoke and drink and stuff like that. So when Lauren was out there, she kicked off her shoes, but yes, she was very intoxicated, so she didn't remember that she had taken them off. Which, honestly, I went out one time in a pair of flip-flops, and I got back to my barracks room, and I did not have those flip-flops anymore, and I still don't know what happened to them. So if she was wearing, in the footage picture that we're going to put on our website, she is wearing black ballet flat kind of things. So, I mean, she probably just quickly kicked them off and didn't really think anything of it. And honestly, I can't tell you how many times I misplaced my phone when I was drinking. I actually think I lost it one night, and the bar called my roommate it was like, hey, Alex left her phone here. And so I had to go pick it up the next day.
I mean, I don't really have a lot of stories of stuff that I've left because usually when I go out with a group of friends, you have one who kind of acts like the mom, and so they kind of keep everything together. But I mean, I've got stories of crazy stuff we've done drinking. We don't need to go there.
She's like, we don't need to do that. So
No, I'd
here's
be
where the story starts
ratting some people out.
So here's where the story starts getting kind of weird. And this is something that a lot of people who have covered the story can say the same thing about, is this whole interaction was just super weird. So Corey and Lauren actually, when they leave the bar, they get back to Lauren's apartment. Okay. They're in the elevator and were literally feet away from her door when they encountered a group of guys. Something happened in the hallway and it caused Corey to be punched in the face and he fell to the ground, hit his head. A guy, now in one article, I found out that the guy was actually named Zach Oakes. But in another article, it said that Zach was actually a passerby outside of Lauren's apartment that testified to how drunk Lauren was because Corey had a fireman carrier. And another one said that Zach was actually the person who punched Corey. So, like I said, conflicting evidence in a whole bunch of articles because police kind of cherry picked on what they put out to the public.
Right. So did Zach have a reason to hit Corey?
From everything I've looked at, no. I honestly cannot find a straight answer. It's almost like all these different newspapers and news stations and papers, like I said before, had different bits of the story, but not the actual full story. So it's kind of very hard to see what was true and what was speculation. Either way, Corey was assaulted by a group of guys outside of Lauren's apartment because he had a black eye and they think he may have had a concussion as well because he hit his head. After the altercation, instead of going into Lauren's apartment, the two just kind of left.
So, okay, something about that doesn't make sense just because, okay, so they get into some kind of altercation outside Lauren's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of going to the safety of Lauren's apartment where they can, like, I don't know, clean up or something, they just leave.
Yep, basically. And Corey really couldn't give a straight answer as to why they decided not to go into the apartment. He says it's because he was severely drunk that night, as well as the punch to his face may have accidentally given him some memory issues and stuff, which honestly would be explainable. But some people do say it's because they didn't want to have the people know where she lived. But at the same time, like I said, they were both insanely drunk, and Corey probably did have a slight concussion. Like, it was to the point where allegedly, like, none of them could really remember, like, how, like, Corey received these bruises and stuff. So they end up leaving the apartments and head back out into the night.
Okay, I know you said that the other men were never identified, but was that because they couldn't get the names or because they had no clue who was actually there?
So I'm pretty sure police knew who was there. Exactly. But they haven't released any of that info. In fact, they haven't released anything pertaining to that night, other than the main players, which was Jay, Jesse, Lauren, Corey, which are those four right there. Okay.
Right.
A picture of what Lauren was wearing that night, and then a slight timeline of witness statements and CCTV footage. Lauren's apartment complex has security cameras everywhere, so they know who was there. They just haven't told the public. So after the two leave the apartment complex, they end up stumbling back to Corey's apartment. Now, when they show up, the pair were a sight to see. Corey had actually started puking out on the front lawn, and Lauren had fallen over because she was so drunk. When I mean she fell over, she didn't fall over like dainty little, like, face first into the concrete, fall over and stuff. That's how drunk she was. So Corey's roommate actually came out to kind of help them inside. Knowing he had his hands full with just Corey alone because Corey was still puking and all that stuff, Michael, Corey's roommate, actually ended up taking Lauren back over to Jay's apartment, which was in the same complex, and dropped her off. According to Jay, he was shocked as hell to see Lauren like that. Mainly because when she left, she didn't look like she got beaten up by a boxer. Yeah. So, yeah, no, it was insane. And, like, some of the things I was reading, I was like, what the hell? So about this time, it's about 3:30 in the morning. Okay. Now, normally people would be winding down, starting to go to bed, trying to, like, puke up whatever alcohol they still had left in their system so they could actually sleep. Jay was ready to go to bed and sleep, but Lauren wanted to keep partying. She tried to get him to have a few drinks with her, but Jay was just kind of being like, no, I don't think it's a good idea. You need to like drink some water. You need to lay down, like go ahead and crash on our couch, stuff like that. Eventually, Lauren kind of gave up and was like, hey, can I use your phone real quick? Because that's when she realized, hey, I don't have my phone anymore. She ended up making 2 phone calls, both went unanswered, and that's when she decided to leave.
So he just let her walk out the door like that?
Yep. Barefoot, no phone, no jacket, Lauren just walked right out into the night. Jay said that he watched Lauren walk past the intersection of 11th Street and College Avenue, and according to the information police came out, that was the last time anyone ever saw Lauren Spierer.
So then we know that when her boyfriend got up in the morning and realized no one had heard from Lauren, that's when he called the police and reported her missing.
Exactly. Jesse had actually texted her a few times throughout the night before he went to bed, but he received no response once Lauren lost her phone, obviously. He figured that maybe her phone had died, or like she was drunk or at home sleeping it off. So Jesse actually ends up calling Lauren's roommate and stuff. And he goes, hey, I haven't heard from Lauren. These people are saying that her phone is at the bar, because he ended up getting a call back from Lauren's phone on his phone. It was the people at Kilroy's being like, hey, if you're looking for the owner of this phone, they left their phone here last night. So if they're looking for their phone, here it is. So that's when he realizes, okay, well, she's probably at home sleeping this off and stuff. So he ends up calling her roommate and being like, hey, can I get your spare key? I want to make sure Lauren's home, but if she's sleeping, she might not hear me knock. So the roommate's like, yeah, sure. So they meet up together and they actually go into the apartment together. And that's when they kind of realize that Lauren wasn't there. There was her clothes weren't there from the night before. Her bed looked made from the morning that she had made it and stuff. Like everything was in place where she left it the night before. And there was no actual proof that she had actually come home that night. They had actually ended up finding her keys and her wallet on the route that her and Corey had taken back to her apartment complex and stuff. So even if she did make it back to her apartment, there was no way that she would have been able to get inside.
Right.
So, because the last time anybody ever saw her at her apartment was when Corey got assaulted. So,
right.
Yeah. Once he started calling her friends, and they all kind of said the same thing. Hey, we haven't seen her. We haven't talked to her since this time and stuff. That's when he started getting a little bit worried and actually called the police to file a missing persons report. Once that was filed, they all of her friends, and Jesse included, realized we need to call her parents. So I don't know if it was Jesse or her roommate. It was never really like sure on which one. Somebody called the Spierers and told them what happened, and the two were actually on a plane heading down to Indiana to search for their daughter that day. So over the next 3 days, the family handed out flyers, put Lauren's face out there, talked to reporters and police, went on like Good Morning America, stuff like that. They did basically everything they could do to make sure Lauren's name was out there and people were looking for her. But after a bit, things started seeming kind of off.
What do you mean by off? Like they found stuff belonging to her, or they actually found her?
Well, I mean, other than the stuff that they found from the initial canvas, they didn't really find her or anything belonging to her. 3 days after Lauren went missing, Jesse's parents actually came and collected their son so he would not be involved.
Involved in searching for her, or so no one would think he was involved in her disappearance?
The latter, actually. So Jesse's parents, not Jesse himself, Jesse's parents actually gave a statement. So Jesse technically gave his statement to the police first off. So when the night that she vanished, he gave his statement to the police. After that, he stopped cooperating. All of the guys involved did, actually, except for Jay. Once her parents actually started digging and trying to get statements from people that were with her that night, everyone lawyered up.
Well, I mean, I kind of get that. You don't want to say anything to the police without one. You might incriminate yourself accidentally. I mean, all you have to do is listen to the confession tapes to know that sometimes people end up saying things they don't mean just to get out of the interrogation.
Oh, God, yeah. Like, it's a huge thing. But one huge rule, when you're being interviewed by the police, is always have a lawyer or defense team with you that can help you. But these guys completely clammed up. When I mean completely clammed up, they ended up basically telling the Spierer family that they were on their own finding their daughter. Jesse's family actually later on ended up coming out with a statement saying Jesse had nothing to do with Lauren's disappearance. It was probably caused due to the level of intoxication that she was under that night, as well as the drugs in her system that she had supposedly taken. They basically said
Oh,
that she wasn't the person that her family made her out to be, and she was actually this wild party girl that got away with stuff because she was pretty.
her boyfriend's family said that? Like the one that she had been in a relationship with for like years. And they weren't a little
Mm-hmm.
more concerned about her being missing. And I mean, did she have a drug problem?
So, one would think they would be concerned, but that's what makes this weird. They were so cold about it, though I know firsthand how easy it is for someone to do that to you when you don't meet their standards. Where if you don't meet how you should be, and it could affect what they look like, they cut you off. So they could have actually been trying to save their son's reputation in that fact. But at the same time, there were reports that Lauren, did dabble in using, cocaine and stuff, like, party drugs and everything. But she wasn't like a party girl. Like, she didn't, like, her roommate even said that she hardly ever did it if she did do it. Like, hardly ever. It was like maybe once or twice that she actually tried it. The one reason why that was a huge thing is because when the police searched Lauren's apartment to look for any clues of where she could be or what happened to her, they did find a small bag of coke in her apartment. So all of a sudden it turned from this girl's missing to, well, what was she doing that night to cause her to go missing? So eventually months went by and there was still no sign of Lauren. Okay. No sightings, no clues, nothing. And her parents were getting to the point where they were frustrated with the police for not keeping them informed of anything. And I mean nothing. At this point, the only person who had cooperated in any way had been Jay. And Jay actually ended up doing a DNA test so he could have his DNA on file, as well as a polygraph test that he passed. He didn't really
Mm-hmm.
talk to the Spears that much, as far as I can tell, but he did do what he needed to do for the police to be like, hey, this is what's going on. About 2 months after Lauren vanished, the police searched the landfill that Bloomington trash was taken to. After 9 days of searching and about 4,100 tons of trash, police had found nothing that was of importance, and everybody was back to square one.
I mean, did they search the landfill because they got a tip, or was it just that they thought it was the next possible thing to do?
Honestly, it just seems like with everything else in this case, no one really knows. Like, the police may have gotten a tip, they may have done it just because, like, that was the next thing to do because they'd already dredged the lake that was nearby, they'd already dredged the river that was nearby. So the police haven't really given much insight to the case at all. They've really only given what they want to give out, and on some level, I get that since they do want to keep any evidence or something that could end up revealing the real killer under wraps. But even Lauren's family feel like they haven't exactly been forthcoming with them.
I mean, I can get how frustrated they would feel with that. Your family member is missing and you're not feeling like you're getting the full story.
Right? So the thing is, if everything happened that night is true, and the last time any of the boys saw her was when she left Jay's apartment, then why aren't they being more helpful in answering her parents' questions? And if Jesse, who wasn't even there that night, supposedly, had nothing to do with it, why isn't he helping search for his girl? Like, why did he stop searching for his girlfriend? And why did his family put out this statement that basically attacked his girlfriend of years? Like, high school, like they got together in high school.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense. It really just does not make sense. So after the landfill
Right.
search, the case kind of started dying out. The family held a lot of press conferences, small gatherings, memorials, as well as up the reward for information on her disappearance. Nothing happened. Eventually, they end up filing a negligence lawsuit against Jay and the two other boys for basically letting her leave the apartment, citing their actions caused the disappearance of their daughter. The judge ended up throwing out the case due to the fact that there was no time limit when people need to look out for friends. So basically, what they were trying to do is saying that these guys knew Lauren was intoxicated to the point where she probably could have gotten hurt, and they let her leave their site without trying to make sure that she got home safely. Which honestly, I mean, it's a good thing. If you go, like, my rule is if you go out with us, you come home with us. I don't care who you are. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care what kind of guy you meet at the bar. If you go out with us, you come home with us. Period. End of story. Because I'm not going to be
Yeah.
responsible, because I don't want to be responsible if you get into a car with a drunk driver and end up getting into an accident or you get killed or something. So I get where they're coming from for that. But the judge basically said, from the reports that I could find, the judge basically said, well, this might deter, like, citizens coming forward to help in other cases. So, like, because, like, the thing is like, if you help a drunk person not get hit by a car, okay, and they're stumbling home, when are you free of that drunk person to where if something else happens to them, you're not going to get in trouble for it?
Yeah. Actually, that weird, something like that kind of weird happened. I was at work, and this was earlier this year. I want to say this was just, I mean, days before the shutdown happened out here for COVID. And we were watching outside, and this guy was just drunk. I mean, this had to be 2 in the afternoon. And he was
Oh my
just
goodness.
belligerently drunk, and he stumbled out and like
That's
fell
dangerous.
into the road. And this is like on Peabody, like right behind the courthouse, right? So he's belligerent, and
Yeah.
he grabs like this power wire to try and stop himself from falling. And this guy probably had to be like 65, like he was older. Or at least he looked older.
Oh
Maybe
my
it was
god.
enough alcohol over the years that he just looked older. But he tried to grab this like this wire, because like you have the telephone poles, right? And then you have like the wires
Yeah.
that kind of like go from the ground up. He grabbed the wire and like
Oh my
tried
god.
to use that to stop, and it like broke something as he fell into the road.
Oh my
So I
god.
called the police station, and I was like,
Which was right there,
hey,
thankfully.
and that's like, because it's the courthouse, and then right across the street is where the police station is, as well as the gym,
Yeah,
and
they're
then
like right there.
the building I work out of is like kitty corner from that, right? So I call the police station. I'm like, hey, there's this guy, and he's drunk, and he like fell into the road, and I am really worried about him because I think he broke one of the power lines when he fell because he grabbed it. I don't know for sure. But if you could send a cop out here or something just to check on him, that'd be great,
Yeah, just to make sure everything's okay.
Well, and what drove me crazy though was it took 10 minutes for a cop to show up when we were literally right there. Like, we could see the police station. And it took 10 minutes for somebody to show up, and a cop drove up from somewhere else. Okay. All the cops on duty were probably out and about. Fine. They talked to him, and then I think they ended up, I don't know if they let him go or they put him in the back of the car. I can't remember now, but that was one of those instances
Yeah.
where it was like, I didn't want to stop watching until the cop showed up, because I was like, what if he does something else? But that's the protective person in me. And I was one of the only people that continued to watch him. The other people that were in the office that were watching this go down just kind of like, well, whatever. If he gets hit by a car, it's his own fault. It was like, seriously? Like, there is no part of this that's okay. Not only is he drunk, belligerently walking down the public sidewalk, but he, I don't want to be witness to, and if I can stop, this person from getting hit by a car for maybe, a driver who's not quite paying attention, or if he happens to stumble out right as this car is going by and nobody can do anything, I don't want to be, I don't want to be witness to that.
Yeah.
So.
But one of the reasons why the judge threw it out is because he basically made the case of, well, when does it stop? Like, he didn't want people to be good Samaritans and then get in trouble because, they saved this guy from getting hit by a car. But then 3 blocks later, he gets hit by a bus because he was still doing the exact same thing and stuff.
Right.
So it really was just a blow to the Spieers because, they didn't want to, they didn't want to do this. They didn't want to do, lawsuits against these people. They didn't want to try and ruin their lives. They just wanted answers to why their daughter was missing and why nobody was telling them anything. Yeah. So heading into this, we are now heading into some of the theories that have sprouted up around this case, okay? Because it's been years. So obviously theories have been coming out. The first one being Corey actually knew a lot more than he was letting on about that night.
Yeah, this was the one I was kind of playing with in the back of my head as you were talking about the case, actually.
Yeah. So all three of them, Corey, Jay, and Corey's roommate, Michael, all three of them told the same story to the police. That Lauren and Corey, showed up at the apartment. Michael put Corey to bed because he was puking and he probably had a concussion from the fight. And then he took Lauren over to Jay's apartment. which, I mean, wouldn't be all that, like, okay, whatever. You were taking care of your roommate. You didn't want to take care of some random drunk girl you didn't know. I get it. But like I said before, Corey and Lauren had actually met before all this had happened. So it was probably a few weeks, but it was probably about a month or two before the actual disappearance. Now, Jesse had actually not been around when Corey and Lauren first met. So the two, it was reported by witnesses that the two kind of flirted with each other a little bit, and actually a few days before the actual disappearance, Corey had actually said that he was romantically interested in Lauren to some friends. So if you want to go by the jilted lover boy theory, Corey could have actually done something to Lauren after she left Jay's apartment and used his roommate as an alibi, which honestly wouldn't be too hard to do because he could have waited until his roommate went to sleep, which if it was that late at night, his roommate probably checked on Corey one more time, noticed he was asleep, and then went to bed himself. And then Corey probably could have gotten out of bed, walked out of the apartment, and then maybe under the guise of going to Jay's to check on Lauren, sees her leave and follows her, and then something ensues. Or another thing that people thought about was maybe Jesse wasn't actually at his house the entire night because some of his frat friends did leave. So maybe he found out that Lauren and Corey had been flirting and thought maybe, there was something else going on, and went to go confront Lauren and found her on her way to her apartment and stuff, and something happened and Lauren got hurt. So there's a few theories that cycle around, the love triangle, like, issue, jilted boy, like, kind of thing going on there, which honestly would make a little sense, but that still doesn't explain, like, why her body was never found if she was dead.
So I'm also wondering because what baffles me honestly the most right at this point is the attack outside Lauren's apartment, and then they didn't go to Lauren's apartment.
Yeah.
I feel like it's possible it could have been where he actually, I don't want to say attacked her because that's not the right word, but I think maybe he came onto her and she fought back. And that's why they both looked like they had a huge fight.
See, that would be understandable, except the fight was captured on CCTV footage with the other boys.
Okay, well then that makes more sense.
So when I mean the police have CCTV footage, I mean they have footage of every time they were in those apartment complexes. Every single time. So they saw everything that happened in the hallways, everything that happened with Lauren going into Jay's apartment and Lauren leaving Jay's apartment, Lauren leaving the apartment early in the evening with David. They saw all of that. However, they haven't released any of that to the public. They haven't shown it to her parents. Literally, the only reason they released anything from the CCTV footage was because they needed an image of what she was wearing the night that she disappeared. So the only image they have from it is the picture that was put out to the public. So, I mean, that's a good theory in sense if there weren't security cameras, because I feel like if that actually did happen, Corey would have been arrested right away.
Well, and I just think that, I mean, it's just a really weird thing that happened where they got into this fight right outside her apartment, and instead of going in there and like recovering. Huh?
Yeah. Why wouldn't you go back into the apartment?
Right. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
But I mean, if they have CCTV footage of the fight, then okay. Like, can't deny that.
So,
then, right?
The next two theories are a little bit more plausible. Okay. Neither of them have ever really been proven, but the next two theories are a little bit more plausible. Okay. William Clyde Gibson was actually arrested in April of 2012 for the murder of 3 women throughout I think it was like 5 years. Okay. The police noticed that he was actually in Bloomington around the time of Lauren's disappearance. Plus, she fits the type of person that he would have attacked, somebody that really couldn't have fought back at the time. However, William has never really said that he was involved with Lauren's disappearance, nor has there ever been any kind of link that came up with it. He did have a vehicle that was matching the description that that witness had seen in the area when Lauren disappeared, where Lauren was last seen. However, that lead kind of fizzled out and wasn't exactly anything that they could follow up on. Now, in stride with Mr. Gibson's case, okay, another similar story kind of pops up about the case of Israel Keys. Now, have you ever
Mm-hmm.
heard of Israel Keys before?
You know, it's weird. Until about 2 weeks ago, I hadn't. And now all of a sudden,
Mm-hmm.
his name keeps popping up everywhere I look. It's getting kind of
It's
weird.
because, okay, so for our viewers who are listening who have actually never heard of Israel Keys, he is actually on my list to do a case for in our second season. And I actually think that that one might actually have to be a two-parter as well because it's huge. Like, it's
There's a
huge.
lot.
So basically, the quick rundown about Israel Keys is he is a serial killer in the US, okay? And he was very famous because it took him so long to get caught. And police
Yeah.
actually still don't know how many murders he's actually committed. So this guy would travel around and he would build these basically like murder boxes, okay?
Mhm.
And he'd bury him in just like this random area where only he knew. And then years later, months later, he would go back and he would find a victim, somebody completely unknown that he had absolutely no connection with, somebody that would never be able to trace back to him, somebody that he could stalk and learn their routine enough to where he'd be able to kill them. Then he would go dig up the nearest murder box and then go commit this crime and then just walk away scot-free because nobody would ever know it was him. And he actually never visited the same place twice. So it was in different states. And for those viewers who are listening, um, police don't really go over state lines when it comes to cases. So if there's a killing in one, so like say if there's a killing in Washington, okay, if there's the same exact killing down in like Colorado or Florida, 9 times out of 10, the police are not going to know about those ones because they're not going to be looking for those ones. They're going to be looking in the state of Washington where they're located. That's how Ted Bundy went so long without being caught because he went to different states and did this. So Israel was, and he confessed to a lot of different cases and stuff. And like police out there think that he may have um, ties to some other cases that have gone unknown. So Israel was actually in Indiana at the time that Lauren went missing as well. He was actually in Bloomington the night Lauren went missing. Okay. And if he did do it, it would explain why her body has never shown up, why there's been no proof that, she was ever killed, nothing, because he was always very clean about it. So now there were toll reports from his car saying that he was up in northern Indiana instead of Bloomington and stuff, but he easily could have gone down to Bloomington and then gone up to the toll roads early that morning and stuff and gone from there. And I mean, who knows? He may have done it and then had her body in the car with him when he was driving and stuff. It just depends. Um, but police were looking at it, but they never actually got solid evidence that it was him. So unfortunately, they would never be like, oh hey, Lauren Spierer was a victim of Israel Keys because he has hundreds of them out there, hundreds that they can't really connect to him yet because they have no proof. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. So Israel Keys was actually executed in December of 2012, I believe it was. So they weren't actually able to ever ask him like, "Hey, did you ever have a connection with the Lauren Spierer case?" Because they didn't start looking into all of the murders that Israel had been or could possibly be involved in until shortly before he had died and stuff. So they never really got. So it was until a little bit after he had died that they were like, "Hey, maybe this guy may have been involved." Um, so another thing is due to the fact this one could be a little bit more plausible, but at the same time, not so much. Because due to the small amount of drugs that were found in Lauren's apartment, some people do feel that her death may have been an accidental overdose. However, if she was alone, then she would eventually be found because, you don't die and then bury your body.
No, no, you don't.
Like you would be, yeah.
I mean, unless she was with someone when the overdose happened. However, people said that she was only drunk. So if she was under the influence of drugs, then it would be interesting to know if they were laced with anything to cause an overdose.
Well, yes and no. So you see, Lauren actually had a heart from my digging. Lauren actually had a heart condition. Okay, it's called long QT syndrome, and from what I could find, if you mix the right concoction of drugs together, it could actually cause an overdose. It doesn't matter if it's so like an amount that would like like a normal person with like no like health history or anything like that could take it and they would just feel the high. In Lauren's case, if somebody with long QT syndrome took it, they could take it. It could exuberate her heart condition, which could actually cause her to overdose and die and stuff. So it was really interesting looking it up because it's like, you know, a small amount that really wouldn't affect somebody normal with normal health issues could actually possibly kill her. Now, if she was with somebody and she had overdosed, I would get like the fear of like, oh my God, she overdosed. Like we're going to be blamed for it and everything and all this stuff or whatever. So they would hide her body or whatever. But at the same time, if that's really what happened, then yes, the guys are lying about what happened that night. However, anything that would have had to have happened after she left Jay's apartment, after she was off the security footage. So it would have had to have been one of them following her, which is why a lot of people actually look at Jesse and think maybe there was something going on there and he did something, which also would explain why his parents took him away so quickly. But
it's possible. I also wonder if maybe her drink got laced with something. I mean, they said she's pretty.
Too. I mean, that too.
And not uncommon.
Well, I mean, any kind of drugs, honestly, any kind of drugs would have like exasperated the heart condition, basically. So, which is why her parents were kind of surprised when they found. Well, it was why her parents were kind of surprised when the police found the cocaine in her room, because they were like, she knows about this heart condition. She knows what could happen if she takes drugs. Like her just drinking the amount that she was drinking could possibly be harmful to her health. But like they knew that throwing in drugs with it would not end well for her.
Yeah, no, there's so many, gosh, yeah. There's just enough about
there's
it that's
there's a lot of, unlike with most cases where, you know, there's a lot more information available to the public. So like there's more that people can go off of. This whole case just kind of makes people raise their brow at the fact that none of the surveillance footage that was taken that night has yet to be released. Like I said before, the only reason we have that picture of Lauren from the night she vanished is because police took a still off the video from it. And in the picture, she actually looks like she's walking down the hallway. She looks like she's very alert, very aware of her surroundings and what's going on and everything. She's actually running her hand through her hair as kind of like it's just like a still of her in action and stuff. And so it's just her. There's nobody else around her, which means they probably cropped out David, who was next to her. Another reason why her parents feel like the police aren't telling them everything is on top of the fact that they are refusing to like question anybody else that could have been involved in her disappearance that night. So basically what makes them feel like is once they found the drugs, like I said before, it went from, hey, this girl needs to be found to, hey, this girl probably was high, something happened, and now she's dead. So it's just a matter of time before her body shows up. Yeah.
Well, and it hasn't yet, which is what's weird.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And that's another reason why people feel like Israel Keys was involved. Because most of his victims have not been found at all. And because he knew what he was doing. And the thing is Lauren had no ties to him. So even if he was involved, there would be no way to prove it because she had no ties to him, because that's what he would do. He would literally pick random people off the street and then just follow them for a few weeks and figure out their pattern. And if for some reason he'd been following Lauren that night and saw an opportunity to grab her because she was alone, intoxicated, you know, walking by herself, not really aware of her surroundings, it would have been a perfect opportunity to do it and then leave. Yeah. So as of today, it's been about 9 years since Lauren has vanished. The family has admitted publicly that they do not think that she will be found alive. However, they do still want some kind of answer as to what happened to their daughter so they can have closure. When Lauren was last seen, she was about 5'5", 95 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes, and she was last seen wearing black leggings and a flowy white top. If you have any information on her disappearance, please contact the Bloomington Police Department or her Facebook page, Find Lauren Spierer, that we will link on our website, truecrimeandchill.com.
Thank you for listening to True Crime and Chill. For more information, including case notes, photos, and sources, visit our website at truecrimeandchill.com. You can also stay connected with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Look for new episodes from us each week on Tuesdays.